Okay, coming back to the other trends and technologies that could shift the future of work in big ways, like generative AI, new human technology interfaces, new ways of thinking about organization structures, we'd like to explore some of these farther-reaching possibilities with you. And to start the conversation, I'm really excited to introduce you to Sam Rad. Sam's the founder of Radical Next, an organization that's dedicated to exploring and shaping a positive future. She's just getting ready to publish a new book called Radical Next, Thriving in Times of Radical Change. And that's going to explore how ideas and technologies will transform our lives and our work in the coming years and decades. Sam is a very charismatic speaker and performer who has shared stories of radical change with global audiences on all 5 continents. She's also advised the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the Federal Reserve Bank, just to name a few. Here to share her perspective on the future of work, please give a warm Ivanti welcome to author and thought leader, Sam Rad.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
How's everyone? Hello. How's everyone doing today? Good? Yeah, I've got you early, bright and early, so thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to be here and share stories of past, present, and more importantly, the future. So I'm going to take you out there, maybe way out there, but I'll start with a story of our own lives, my own life, particularly of experiencing radical and accelerating change in my lifetime. So let's go back to the 2000s, early 2000s. I was in high school at this time, and I had the opportunity to leave the country for the first time and go to England to study. Now, so you remember this technology here, right? Cartography, a map. Very advanced at the time. So at the time, I was equipped with just that and a calling card and dropped off at an airport, and I arrive, 16 years old, and find my way to where I was going. Taking some buses and public transportation and using this technology. Didn't call home for 2 weeks. Life was good, right? So that was, in our lifetime in the 2000s, maybe 20 years ago. Let's fast forward 10 years later in my life. So I was already on my 3rd company, and as Jeff mentioned, I built companies remotely from the beginning. So I had formed a team. We were based all over the country. And they were based mainly in San Francisco. Now, I actually lived in Utah at that time, so I think some of you, that's where your office is based. I was in Park City. And much to my dismay, I had to move to San Francisco. So what do I do? When I get there on that first day, I have a meeting. I have no idea where I'm going. So I just pull out this device in my pocket, right, and use this app and basically teleport from one location to another without even knowing where I was going, getting in a car with a stranger. Right? Crazy thought. And that was 10 years, in the span of 10 years. Does anyone remember this? Talking to the right, yes! Did anyone work on this? No, but remember this, it was quite analog. Like, it was probably MapQuest, right? Late 90s, early 2000s. Companies were working on better wayfinding technologies, right? Digitizing a map, as Jeff mentioned, digital transformation. Now let's move to 2005, this tiny company over here called Google. And they look at a map differently. They're saying, we're not just going to create better wayfinding technologies or provide better directions. We're going to look at this differently. And we're going to look at it as data, something to be digitized, and do something completely insane at the time, which was share that data with developers and competitor companies to build on top of it. Now, that was totally insane. If you think of the time that data was the new gold, it still is the new gold, right? And then to think at that time, we're just going to share this. But you know what happened? An entire trillions of dollars of value is unlocked. The entire Web 2 internet community, right? Wayfinding technologies, ride sharing, food delivery, which we're all probably a little too familiar with now, post-pandemic, right? Home sharing technologies. Location-based reviews, even the ways that people meet and date, much to our dismay, right, changed because of the opening of mainly geolocation data. So how did we go from this map to this app in 10 years? It's a relatively short period of time in human progress, right? So was it a convergence of technologies? Certainly. A lot of things were happening at that time in terms of the availability of data, the shift to mobile technologies, but really it was this radical evolution in thought and thinking. The thinking to open data, which was never really before done. Now, of course, this was accelerated by exponential or emerging technologies at the time. So again, this is the late 90s, early 2000s internet revolution. We saw, again, the shifts in the hardware, in the software that we're using, payment rails, again, geolocation data, and some of the trends towards social and social networks. And so this has really shaped the world that we're now living in today. Most of us in this room, I would think 100% has a mobile phone, right? Smartphone, likely. I would think so at this point. So it radically reshaped how we work, how we live, how we organize. As I mentioned, how we move from place to place, how we eat food, how we even meet other human beings romantically changed. So I'm going to take you today from a little bit past, present, but I'm a futurist, right? So we have to go to the future, but there's a lot that we can learn from the past. So I'm going to go on a whirlwind tour from past, how we came together as human beings and worked in the past, which was mostly analog and localized, and then we shifted to this digital revolution, which was digitized, globalized, right? We went through the globalization changes as well. And then where we're going in the future, which is largely decentralized, remote, flexible, and autonomous. So let's go back to the past really quickly. Again, not a historian, but let's go to the beginning or the commonly believed beginning, depending on who you ask, right? Mesolithic era, about 2 million years ago. And humans started harnessing technologies, mainly fire, and that brought us together in groups. I wouldn't say work started, that work, proverbial work, but communal living. And then we fast forward to about 10,000 BC. And this is my favorite time in human history, mainly because I worked quite deeply in the blockchain space. And people would say, why is a ledger so important? I said, you know what? A ledger right here was the beginning of human civilization and writing. So this is a ledger recording a transaction between two oxen, apparently, on Sumerian cuneiform writing. So what happened? We had writing, we had math, division of labor, and probably what we could consider the beginning of work, really, agrarian revolution and farming. And everything just accelerated past then. So we go, boom, get into the Romans, the Greeks, the classical era, this emergence of golden ages and Renaissance, anything from the invention of paper and medicine and mathematics. And we fast forward to the movement of people around the world. And this was happening in numerous places around the world, both from China and the Vikings out of Europe, exploring the world with, again, the beginning of wayfinding technologies and the movement of people and ideas. And again, we fast forward again to the relatively recent past. So the Gutenberg printing press, right? The dissemination of information, ideas, and people. So Industrial Revolution. 1900s. This is probably where the modern era and the 9 to 5, so starting in Britain and then coming to the US and then global, mass production, right? Globalization, supply chains, the beginnings of all of this, but also the factory setting, both from the educational and work environment, necessitated basically, a 9 to 5, this idea of timekeeping, of clocking in and clocking out. And this laid the groundwork for our modern conceptions of how we structure our days, right? Work versus leisure, but also how we structure work in general. So we took that mindset, and then all of a sudden, fast forward, right? We go from a map to an app. And we take a lot of these ideas from about 2 million years through the past and come to the future. So here we are in the present or recent past, the information age. And again, I mentioned the technologies such as shifts in hardware and software, the infrastructure, telecoms, and then the movement of people, globalization, global corporations, air travel. All of this shifted over the past 50 years or so. And now we're sitting in this environment where, yet again, we're about to go through accelerating change. So again, I'll remind you of this shift from this map to this app. This was 10 years. This was everyone who's in this room, I would think, remembers this shift, which is why I share the story, because we've all been through it. And we're going through another then. So this is what I call the operating system for the future. Now, I have hopefully a bunch of fellow techies in this room. So I'm not talking about hardware or software operating systems. I'm an anthropologist. I study people for a living. So when I refer to this, I mean our social operating systems, how we make meaning, our systems, our institutions, our social norms, our concept of work and organizational structures. And so here we are. We're on the cusp of a new era, which is, what I'll refer to as the age of acceleration. Right now, at the moment, I could have been here and been your AI speaker. Last year, I would have been your metaverse speaker. 2 years ago, maybe blockchain and IoT. Next year, it will be quantum computing. So the reason that I combine all of this to an epoch or era is that it's about a convergence of technologies, right? We might hear often in the mainstream media, it's about this one right here, which is also not a very new technology. If I'm speaking to the right audience, you'll know that. Many of these technologies are not new, but they're coming together, this unique moment in time, with a convergence of technologies and a shift in behavior and mindset, which similarly shaped and led us into this recent era, again, of the information age. So, again, I mentioned and joked about metaverse. It was kind of a buzzword for a second. Neil Stephenson, in 1992, a science fiction novel called Snow Crash, coined this term. And many people think of this concept of metaverse as a place we go, right? Put on a haptic suit in the VR goggles and you go to a different space. Now, I interpret it slightly differently. I take out of his definition the idea of a metaverse, a world where there's a persistent world where that reaches, interacts with, and affects nearly every part of human existence. Now, when we think of data and data ubiquity, does that not sound like that definition here? That every aspect of our lives is virtually or digitally mediated at this point. So that's the world that we're going into, the context that we're going into, both with the way that we live and the way that, more particularly, the way that we work. And so the big shifts that are coming in the age of acceleration that are well underway were organizations and social structures that were moving into a digitized context, but largely opaque, siloed, competitive, reactive, and centralized, whether that's an organizational structure or within the organization or even our globalized context. And they're shifting now to data ubiquity, more transparency, therefore autonomous systems, so we can build products on top of that, more open and collaborative, so sort of an open source data model, and therefore decentralized, or more of an ecosystem versus institutional model. So let's look at how some of these broader shifts, both in technology and human behavior, are impacting the workplace. So people, place, as I say, provisioning, so hardware, software, tooling, and ultimately our purpose. So there, again, as Jeff mentioned, we could go through so many angles here all day long about how the world is changing. I'm going to take you a little farther out because it's important to look at what's coming so that what we're building today and the decisions that we're making today are tracking towards what's happening in the next 10 to 20 years. So people. People's the cornerstone of everything. We're all human beings here in a room together. Again, I'm team human, team anthropologist, also a techie though, so I've always studied the impacts of technology on people. Something that we're seeing in terms of organizational structures to support the trends in people is the shifting landscape of what a job role even is, right? So we are going from this concept of a role or one function to flexible functions, the rise of the creative generalist. So here, I feel okay to put these people up against each other in a competition. We've got MBA all the way and unhirables. I'm sort of this person all in one. So I feel like I can make fun of myself a little bit here. So team A versus team B, right? We've got someone who's like a specialist, and nothing against specialists. We all need specialty knowledge. But the world that we're going into is constantly changing, and flexibility and adaptability is key. So when you're thinking about not only your own skills or that of your team, but that of the people that you will be hiring or bringing into the workforce, they're going to look a little bit differently than they might have in the past, right, in terms of skill set. So you might have looked at something in the past, like a resume of here's all the skills, whether it's an IT team or a security team, say, oh, I want this experience. But maybe on team B, we'll use the context of cybersecurity here because it's the #1 skill, right? We all need it. Well, maybe these people, she's traveled, she's got 8 languages, traveled to 50 countries, great capacity for learning new languages, perhaps even programming languages. This guy's an NFT trader, probably not very good idea, but has managed a team of 1,000 and a decentralized autonomous organization. He has complete skill set in terms of remote work. And then this one, who sounds a little bit like me, self-taught engineer, doesn't have a degree in it, linguist, okay, that's cool, actually can build some large language models in our spare time as a bit of a white hat hacker, so maybe you've got a penetration tester there. These people do not look on a resume like what you would be looking for in terms of skills. But that's really the way that the future is going. And so when we see headlines like this, which this is like last fall in 2023, super out of date by now. But at the time, it was like the hot new skill is a prompt engineer. 2 days later, the Harvard Business Review puts out the next article, oh, it isn't the future. And just yesterday, I saw something, prompt engineering is dead, which was predicted. So how do you develop an organization where every other day a role does not exist? How do you develop an organization if that function will not exist? And so this is, again, the rise of the generalist. So thinking in terms of how you develop your skill set, organizational skill set, and who you hire are going to have more of a broad knowledge of unlearning and learning as opposed to specific skills, because those will change. So the evolving landscape, the context that we operate in, both in terms of technological change and social change, prioritize and necessitates adaptability and these diverse skill sets. So I'll do one more on the topic of people. So people, human beings, the cornerstone of, I'd say, society, the workplace, and what we're all doing here. But now we have the emergence of a new party in the room, right? Autonomous colleagues. So right now, let's say working from home, 2023, this is John. He's quite overwhelmed. He doesn't have the experience to know how to reach out for people when he needs help. Do you see his third arm? Do you guys catch it? Uh-huh. I put it in there just to see if we've got some discerning audience members. Anyways, so John obviously doesn't know how to use Midjourney, but he's overwhelmed, right? We're used to having structures put in place from him in an office environment, quite overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Emma has started working with an autonomous agent. She's running her own on-prem model. She's like in the boardroom already pitching, the next ideas. And so, the reality is, with a lot of fear right now, and most organizations I speak to do not want to implement any of these technologies in fear of replacing the human roles. But the thing is, what we're finding is that people are either sitting at home in fear, will not reach out, will not learn, will not collaborate. Meanwhile, the people who are leveraging the technologies in responsible and ethical ways are able to accelerate both themselves and the organizations. And so again, when we have a lot of doom and gloom headlines, like AI will replace human workers, it really is about looking at enhancing and augmenting versus replacing. So again, AI will not replace, but rather enhance human capabilities. And the concept here is thinking about the infrastructure that will support this, right? I mean, it can't possibly be that we're putting entire organizations' data into some sort of someone else's model, right? So we'll see foundation models in basically people probably running their own servers even, who knows? Probably not. Place, okay? So the context in which people are doing the work. Where is it? What time are they doing it? How are they doing it? In what ways? It's, again, the 9 to 5 of the Industrial Revolution is long gone. So I say from 9 to 5 to offsite on 9-5. We're all here in a room together for a group, so we might see this shift again of this desire for co-location at certain points in time, but perhaps not in regular intervals from 9 to 5. Right? So what does the workspace of the future look like? Certainly not this. You remember this movie. I love WALL-E. He's a great anthropologist. Or they. I don't know WALL-E's pronouns, but they've come to, right, to look at, to come to see the planet completely plugged into our devices, no brain, no thinking. Right, so that's what we imagine when we think of remote work. It's like drones sitting like this. But at the end of the day, we do strive for human connection. At the same time, according to Harvard Business Review, there's clearly a discrepancy between the demand of workers and those willing to return to an office, right? So people want to stay in either flexible or remote or adaptable environments or places, both physical or otherwise. And again, we have articles like this of saying, like, here is the future. Who in the room, show of hands, wants to work like this? Looks comfortable. I would if it was like a waterbed. But, so we're seeing this come out too. And like, pretty cool setup, actually. I was a gamer, so I'm like, maybe. But it's likely not going to be like that. So we're seeing the shift, though, of the hardware and software provisioning, the way that people are working. We might have more immersive hardware, right? VR headsets where this gentleman is actually controlling an avatar who's repairing a satellite in space, but from the comfort of his living room. Or his daughter is off on a field trip to ancient Rome, or doing a physics experiment in virtual Mars. And so the shifting context of a virtual reality is likely. Now, I'll tell you of the moment today, more of an augmented reality. So this is quite a trippy picture of the data coming through New York City. That's where I'm from. As mentioned, I'm writing my second book. 10 years ago, I joked that I'd write an entire novel on my cell phone. And at the time, when I had a Razr flip phone, that was quite a feat. Now, my phone is mostly filled with notes. And I will tell you, the process of writing this current book that's coming out in the fall is mostly me walking around New York City, talking to myself, transcribing things into my headphones, which then are put into a system and outlined for me. Then I sit down and write, because I'm a writer. So there's a lot going on there, both with technology and process and security. I mean, the whole world can hear what I'm talking about for this book through New York City. So you think about the places of your teams, your workers, and the hardware to provision them. It's probably not this first thing of the comfort of their bedroom, in the security of their bedroom, in that very nice, comfortable bed, but it's more out and about in cities, in different countries, in different environments. Again, I travel a bunch. I'm at the airport often. People with these amazing computer setups now, travel computers. I'm like, I hope you don't work in security. I'm reading everything that's on your device, right? But you're out and about amongst people, and we need to think of that context. So while the virtual tools will facilitate productivity, certainly augment and enhance, the human connections become central to the creativity, the innovation, the collaboration, and also our thinking in terms of the security mindset. So I play with words. I was playing with all the P words. And I know this audience, provisioning is important to think about. So I've hinted at the shifts in technologies, right? Technologies are super easy to predict, these trends. You don't even need me on stage. Remember this? This is 96. Okay, let's fast forward. We have Ask Jeeves to ChatGPT asking the same question, a conversational interface surfacing information. This is likely not going to change. The interface will change, the hardware will change, but the idea of surfacing information will persist. What about this? Remember this, 1959. Okay, designing information visually. Now we've got Midjourney on an iPad, not too dissimilar. It will likely continue to evolve in this way. And finally, my last one. Remember this? Do people remember this? It's 1940s World Fair. Actually, I learned something that's quite old. And here we are. So the tech trends are not too hard to predict. We can look at the goals of the interfaces, the hardware, and the software. They're probably going to be the same. But what's notoriously difficult to predict are human trends, human behavior. So one thing I will say here, and I'm sharing this as someone who looks at the future, not advocates for what I'm about to share, is that what is likely is that the hardware is getting closer to the body. So we had screens that maybe we would see only in an office, and they came to the home. We have screens that now are in our pockets. We soon will have screens that will be more close to the body or embodied. So you have this scene from The Matrix where, of course, Neo is plugged in, he downloads information, he learns something, right? And so the era that we're moving out of, if we're here in the age of acceleration, and again, this was like 10 years, this is like 5 minutes probably between here and here. I haven't named it. We can name it something, consciousness revolution, post-advancement, where we're now seeing brain-machine interfaces, immersive realities, multiple immersive realities or environments, everything advancing, getting closer to the body. So the big question here is that as your hardware and your software starts getting closer to the body and mind, again, where we've now had a real-life bionic person, Neuralink actually have a chip in the brain. And we have Meta talking about the future of communication being something called telepathy. And I think humans actually possess this skill. But this aside, technological telepathy. So we're now moving from maybe we're traveling and I'm out of pocket to actually fully plugged in, even if you're out of a work context. And so this is where I get to the point where cyber and cognitive security is the most important skill set of the future. Now, we could look at trends of the gaps, the skills gaps, and could have told you that, right? That is the #1 in-demand skill. And I'm not saying this from a demographics or skills standpoint. I'm saying from it, if we assume that people are going to be moving about in different locations, so their place is changing, if they're working with different skills, different structures, and autonomous colleagues, so feeding their innermost thoughts into autonomous systems, and the hardware and software that they're using or provisioning is changing from perhaps a laptop or a mobile device to an in-ear monitor, contact lens, a chip, or something otherwise. Security and protection of not only those devices, but the humanity and the discernment between what is technologically mediated and what is not is the most important skill of the future. So historically, I brought you from quite a bit through history. Starting in, I'd say, the Renaissance thinking, we prioritized quite heavily this side of the brain. So logic, reason, linear thinking. And we've deprioritized a little bit of, I'd say, the creative capacities of the right brain. It's a bit more unstructured, it's a bit more flowy, it's a little uncomfortable. There's not much data, similarly to how I've told stories on stage today, by design. So I argue that we need to get to a place of balance between these two hemispheres for the sake of not only celebrating humanity, but protecting humanity from a cognitive and cybersecurity perspective. Without the union of critical thinking and creativity, we have no discernment. And in a world, right, where the provisioning, again, gets in or on the body, that gets quite confusing. So I have one more P, and this is the most important P, right? We talked people, place, provisioning of hardware, but what about purpose? It's why we do what we do. It's why someone will stay at a company, why they'll do work. And yet we're living in this environment, this fear-mongering-based environment of AI will replace our jobs. Will my industry exist? Will we have robot overlords? Who's going to be the one that's running it or designing those models? It's a hard environment to find your purpose or passion in something when there is so much fear and fear-mongering in the media. Will it kill us? So did anyone dabble in some virtual worlds in this community or gaming? Maybe a little bit. So as an anthropologist, I was quite different. I studied virtual worlds. And I had this avatar in 2008 where I lived fully immersed for 6 months in a virtual world called Second Life. So I've always had this interest of, again, virtually mediated environments. Now, fast forward to 2020. Of course, we know the world shifted. My speaking was put on hold, so events, of course, were not happening. And I joined a company, got back in the trenches as CEO of a global communication company. We were working with a number of technologies that at the time were not yet publicly available. A lot of these were in the veins of language models, deep learning, facial recognition, biometric, etc. So it's now all happened. And I'm sitting there, right, in my house alone, running this company, and being like the kind of hacker that I am, I start playing around with combining all these technologies. So I'm going to show you a little video and talk over it. Here, I decide, okay, I'm going to clone myself in 2020. So first I mapped my face, because it was a video communication platform, right? And so I was like, okay, I'll do this on myself. What happens if I create a clone of my face? That was the virtual Sam Rad, circa 2020. And then I was like, okay, I need to clone my voice. So I'm now cloning my voice, reading bedtime stories, talking into a model for about 30 minutes a day, to the point that then the voice, right, could repeat exactly what you're hearing now on stage. And I go back to the drawing board. I say, what's like the third piece of this? You've got voice, you've got likeness, and now my innermost thoughts. So to the point that the model could generate basically what I'm doing here on stage right now. And I put it all together.
Hello, this is samrad.ai, the artificially intelligent virtual clone of Sam Rad, reporting to you from the metaverse or wherever I am. So I just wanted to say that what's coming next is radical and accelerating change, and you're in good hands with the lovely human you have with you today.
Let's give her some, that was 2020. That's not me, right? Okay, so thank you, samrad.ai. I freaked out, okay? This is me just kind of sitting in a room building this, saying, okay, this is coming very soon. And I sit there and question, what role would I play in the future? Certainly she's going to replace me on stage, right? Certainly she's going to replace me in my job. And what does this mean for humanity? People soon will all be able to do this. So I do what an anthropologist does and finally goes and meets some people. I disappeared into the Amazon and spent some time completely off-grid, right? Reconnecting to my humanity. I thought I'd never look at a computer again or a phone again. I would never build anything again. I was like, oh no, this is very bad. And I had some time to reflect, because these are very existential questions that we're all experiencing now at this moment. Ultimately, obviously, I'm here. So I came back, and I came to the conclusion that while these changes are inevitable, we can look at them with optimism, right? And harness the technologies to augment and enhance our humanity, not replace it, which is what I've done. And I'm still quite analog, if you can tell. I bring my startup mentality to my apartment and write on walls. So really, the conclusion I came to is the future of humanity, the future of work, the future of the way that we live and organize isn't automated. It's not replaceable. It's completely creative and connected and collaborative. And whether that means co-location or not, remote work or not, whether that's different tools or technologies, it really needs to be from the mindset of humanity and human first. So really, I'll leave you with this in 3 takeaways as I close. Transmuting fear into opportunity and optimism is the mindset for the future, not just the future of work, but the future in general. If we all look at this and get scared and disappear like I did into some proverbial metaphorical jungle, of course we will not harness the progress or enhance the humanity or protect humanity, right? We'll just get into a state of ambivalence and oversight. And that's certainly not the future. So 3 lessons to take away. First, adaptability, flexibility. That's the key word here of this event the next few days. Henry Ford, so we go back to the Industrial Revolution. This is an often oversighted paradigm or metaphor, right? But in the early 1900s, maybe 1903-ish, the invention of the Model T, First automobile, Henry Ford is quoted as saying, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. They had no idea, that a car, the automobile, would be coming, and then the infrastructure to support that, roadways, and if you could tell them now autonomous vehicles and everything, you wouldn't have been able to think about it. So we're at this moment now. Again, the shift in mindset, like I started, from a map to an app. If you ask someone who designed a compass and a map that one day this data would underpin everything that we did to move around, no one would have believed it. Number 2, recognize that these are paradigm shifts. They will completely restructure everything that we know in our lives, right? And so this era that we're in is a broader paradigm shift. It's not just about a technology of the day. It's not just about a shift to remote work. It's everything. So again, it's about a mindset, about returning to first principles, taking apart the Lego pieces and not being afraid to do that and rebuild them. I'm not saying get rid of all of your infrastructure and systems, just like Jeff said, right? But it's about taking that mentality when you're architecting a new system from a first principles mindset, so starting from the beginning, from the first piece. And the final piece I'll leave you with, and the most important one, is celebrate humanity and reclaim humanity. We're in a virtually digitally mediated world. That's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it's something that we need to think about, right? So everyone in this room, you are the heroes, and I'm not just saying that to pander to you. I'm saying that you are the ones that are connecting and securing the future, the ones that are equipping the people, right? That are activating the places and spaces, that are provisioning the tools, whether that's a mobile device or something beyond. And ultimately, all of these things combined are what helps people achieve their purpose. And purpose and passion is why we do what we do. That's why we work or build something. It's not because, I want to drive shareholder value. I mean, maybe that is. But, right, we work because we want to make an impact on this world. And all of these things lead to that. So we're at this unique, incredible moment in human history. Everything is shifting and changing, including work, right? And I'll bring you back, just to close it here, to, again, this ledger, this database, right? So if you ask this person, like 20,000 years ago, that this database on a stone tablet would be digitized, photographed from some museum, put into a slideshow, projected from some sort of device back there, and now you're watching it here 20,000 years later, I'm sure this person might have written a nicer note or something, right? But they've had an impact in the future. And so every single one of you in this room, when you think about, okay, my decision today doesn't really matter, I'm just one person, that even the smallest ripples create waves that change the world. And so with that, I will thank you. And I'm very grateful to have had this moment. I'll invite Jeff onto stage, and thank you very much.